profitability, gearing, cash flow, and other key financial indicators. This is the water sector learning how to speak the language of the financial sector in order to communicate better about the needs that we have and how they can help with them. Establishing a marketing plan for emphasising the consumer benefits, again, the stakeholder communication side coming through. Reviewing the cost and methodology of securing a credit rating or shadow credit rating. Of course, credit ratings can cost utilities money, and a number of our members, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, have used the baby step of getting a shadow credit rating in the meantime to get on that ladder towards bankability and recognition of that bankability. And finally, ensuring timely repayment of debt and avoiding litigation by creditors. I think it's something we're all aiming for. Lastly, I did want to mention also, households are the most numerous group of investors that utilities have. And I think that we talk about tariffs, of course, but I think they need to be considered quite strongly in this milieu. So this is a chart here of the water tariffs required to meet the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. I put a little star again next to the Middle East and North Africa. 10.1% increase in the tariffs on average across the region is going to be needed to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the largest increase of all of the regions. This is a little bit more about the households and sort of how can we get into their heads. Again, this is global scale research, and I would advise anyone who is interested in these kinds of questions and getting answers to those kinds of questions to do local research as well to really understand your local community. But we asked some questions of household customers of utilities. Do you think people should pay for water? I was very heartened to see that 83% of people said yes. So we're all on the same page about that, at least. The next question we asked was, would anything make you want to pay more for water? A slightly smaller majority, but 67% did say yes, and this piqued our curiosity, because what could that possibly be? And next we said, which of the following would make you want to pay more for water? Now, half of the people came back and said something completely baffling, like we'd like free plumbers. But we did make sure we kept all of that data if you're interested to see it. But I think most importantly, the 31% group said more convenient sources of tap water are outside the home. So a number of our member utilities are already doing this, where they have networks and relationships with restaurants where you can go and fill up your water bottle, and it saves the customers money. Okay. It saves the customers money because they're not buying bottled water, which can be between 500 and 1,000 times more expensive than tap water, but also it's more convenient, and the utility maintains its customer outside the home. I'm just going to skip a few slides here because we're running out of time. This is our prediction about the sources of finance and where those sources are going to come from in the lead up to 2030. In the Middle East, and just to summarise, Middle East and North Africa, we predict that there's going to be 17.4% of the funding coming from private finance, which actually is a growing global opportunity overall. Here's a map with some other examples from around the world of where this kind of thing is happening. And this leads me to one of my final points, blended finance. It's not a new concept, but it is becoming more scaled as donors like the World Bank start to become more interested, and we actually held a workshop with them and a lot of the utilities from the MENA region last year in Paris about how to scale this up, how to bring in private finance, donor finance, government finance, and blend that with the tariffs. So this is all about the sectoral reform, making the financial solutions appropriate for local conditions through things like corporatization and consolidation. And this is the teaser. This is the Urban Water Catalyst Fund. What is it? Well, it's a new initiative that we're starting. It's a public-private partnership that aims to accelerate the rate at which cities achieve Sustainable Development Goal 6 for water and sanitation. It's got 3 parts to it. Firstly, we're scaling up an existing program which has been proven to work for many years now under the leadership of 2ML Consulting, led by Dr. William Mahewi, who was the former managing director of the Uganda National Water and Sewage Corporation. So he has been to around 50 utilities and never had a failure with this program. We've seen it happen. We believe in it. We're going to scale that up. We're going to do about 20 projects a year, and we're going to open up the investor channel so that donor money and private finance can find a new home. Then what we're going to do is we're going to encourage the already existing high-performance utilities in developing countries to move towards commercial investor terms, and that's where that private finance element comes through. And then lastly, we bring it all together and we encourage other investor groups to get involved from a blended finance perspective. So we're about to change the two-pronged problem of there's plenty of money but not enough bankable projects. And I hope that you'll come with us on this journey. Our meeting and the launch of this initiative, of this fund, is going to happen at the Global Water Summit on the 8th and 10th of April in London. And please also do be aware that we are also launching, in cooperation with His Excellency Dr. Hazim Al Nasser, the Middle East Water Forum, and I'm sure he would be delighted if you all came and be part of that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess they left me to be the last one, so you will get all tired. So we'll have less questions, hopefully. Today, there's so many things already my colleagues have touched base with. So these things I'll just go through quickly, and the rest I'll try to explain in the next 15 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Sure. This room will be occupied by 3:30. So go, shoot.
So first we'll talk quickly about cash flow objectives, key components, and then we'll focus more on challenges of cash flow for water utility. And I think that's the critical issue in our subject. Then we'll talk a little bit about follow-up and update, and lastly we'll just conclude with a quick slide. The first thing, when we say cash flow objectives, can we just, share the audience a little bit? When you think about cash flow, why we're doing it? Can we have quick answers, in just a couple of words? Anybody?
Sustainability.
Sustainability.
Again.
Cash flow objective, why we're doing it? In 2 words, 3 words.
هي بتحدد لنا الفلوس النقديه او الموارد النقديه اللي موجوده.
So how much cash we have?
Yeah.
Anything else? How much more cash do we need for the future operation?
Yeah.
How can we sustain this? So that's part of the objectives. Let's look at this from different perspectives. The first thing, like we all talked about, I need enough cash to do what? For sustainability. For what? What do I have? I have operations, right? My daily operations. And then I have investment. And then finance. Where would I get this money from? What do I have to repay this year from the loans I have? So when we think about cash flow, we have to think about all these things. But when I have this picture, now I know what I need. The key issue, how to deal with this. Am I ready for it? Am I sustainable? Am I stable? Can I survive? That's all key questions we have to keep in mind. What are the key components? I'll just go through that quickly. We talked about it. End of the day, I'm collecting the money from my customers or subscribers, if they ever pay, and I have to pay my suppliers, and that includes material and services, right? And not to mention one of my high cost components, and that's staff. Right? If you think about it, that's my cost. When it comes to my investment, it's always, we have fixed assets, high intensive infrastructure with lots of cost, long-lived investments. And that's, again, very critical issue we'll talk about in the challenges. In financing, we have definitely the normal finance, which is call somebody in the government, if they ever have the money, and other things that we'll talk about in the next few slides. And definitely you have donors. And finally, loans, which, as you mentioned, it's not easy to get. And now we'll talk about why. We broke the challenges into different levels. The first one, has to do with the business. The structure of the water sector, the structure of the utilities. The first thing is monopoly. When we talk about this, people say, that's a good thing. Right? I have full control. I decide what to do, but this comes with a cost. It's highly regulated sector. Right? They always ask you to get the best service ever at almost no cost. Right? You always hear that. It's a gift from God. Why do you have to pay for it? And the worst ever, for so many reasons, there is very low enforcement in the region when it comes to collection. They all support you in the media. But once you go to certain area, they stop you there and saying, excuse me, you can't touch this. Right? That's a very common thing. We have definitely a weak institutions. Most of the institutions has been there for ages, hardly done proper restructuring. You have multi-layers of staff to make sure you have enough employment in that sector, even though lots of them are not even qualified to be in the sector, right? That's we all see. We have always staff shortage, which is funny. We have so many layers yet. I always have problem with staff, qualified staff, in certain position. When I say staff shortage, doesn't mean like I need 800, I have only 500. It could be I need 800, I have 1,000. But actually, I'm missing 200 or 300 with the right qualification. So when I say shortage, it's shortage for the positions needed and not for number of staff only. And we have always an issue with like political powers. Interference with all types, for all reasons. Whether it's for the social issues, promotional issues, election issues, we have always this interference in the region. We have definitely a poorly managed assets, and that's not necessarily because we are not efficient now. Keep in mind when we talk about the water sector, what are we talking about? Assets that lives for 50, 60 years, some of even 100 years, and this always there, it's all in the ground, and sometimes cannot be even touched, we cannot even figure out what's going on with it. We have lack of information, and that's very critical. I don't know enough about my operations. Lots of the utilities, from my experience working in the region, and even outside the region, lots of them, they don't have the right information system. When I say the right information system, I'm talking about everything starting from the technical, where when we talk about metering, from production to the zones to the customer meter. And still, you don't have even proper information about the details of your financials. I need to know for each source, for each network, for each zone, how much does it cost me to provide this service? That's something we always have to keep in mind to be able to sustain this. One of the key issues you mentioned, like when we talk about assets, most of our assets not suitable for financing. If you finance a network that's extremely costly, it's long-lived, it's under the ground, what's it going to do with it? If you don't pay after 2 years, I'll dig in, take the network out, and sell it. That's one of the key issues, that it's not bankable. I can't do anything with it. We have always a mismatch. When we say long-lived, right away think about it. I built a network for 50 years, I have a will that could last 100 years, yet what's going to happen? My invoices are based on the quantity of water reached the customer. It's not produced even. It's all variable. And which bank will even look at you saying that it will take me 50 years to recover my cost? That's one of the key issues we have. It's very easy to hide deficit, right? All what you have to do, don't pay your governmental bills. If the electricity company is managed by the government, don't pay. They cannot cut the electricity. If they do, what's going to happen? In some areas, but in most of the areas they can't, because you cannot cut on water. And you hide it, lots of time it's like we hide it with donations. A donor comes in, he do like investment, sometime in operation, give you materials, and all that stuff. You hide the cash flow. You totally forget about it. Oh, I don't have a deficit. You have a real deficit. You don't have a deficit this year in the cash flow, which is completely different. Now let's go to collection, billing and collection. It's much harder to cut water service. It's funny that if you don't pay your electricity bill, once the due date is out, you find that you're out of electricity.
Yes.
When it comes to water, it's totally different. In so many areas, they say, you cannot do that. That's not right. The water is from God. But everybody forgets that, for example, let's say, if my water is coming from desalination, they can drink from the sea. They're not doing that. You have to do the desalination, you have to transport water, transmission costs, and all that costs until you get the water to them. So that's perception. We have always an issue with this. We have always the issue with willingness to pay and ability to pay. That's a big issue. It's not always about the ability. So many times they have the ability, but they are not willing to pay for it. Again, because of the perception. And definitely we have always the issue with collection, because once you go into collection, there is so many interferences. We're talking about internal issues. It could be our staff, our capability, lack of data. It's all obstacles that we have to keep in mind. And after all that, if you can, with all this, you have an issue with all the interferences from the external party. At that time, everybody just find a reason or support certain group so they will not pay the bills. We have an issue that we don't always keep in mind, the billing cycle. Do we have a monthly? Or like, is it every 3 weeks, every quarter, every 3 months or a quarter? Or are we talking about an annual bill? So looking and keeping that in mind, what do we have? We have to look at the timing of the collection. When are we going to collect our bill? If I'm talking about an annual, for example, we have some cases in the Arab world. Annual, and the penalty comes in only in October. What incentive do I have to pay my bill earlier? Where I have to pay my salary every month, I have to pay my electricity bill, I have to pay for my supplier, but I cannot collect for another like 10 or 11 months if I ever collect. So this management is very critical to make sure you're tallying your collection with the cash outflow you have. Now, when we talk, like, I mean, follow up. 2 minutes, 2 slides. When we look at this, always like, we need to update. And when we say update, I first have to monitor. I need to know if there is a variance or not. That's one question. But what's the most important question? Why do I have it? Would it impact my future cash flow? Is this variance continuous or only a shift between 1 month or another? That's an analysis. We have to look into this deeply because this will impact my ability to pay my next month's salary. Am I ready for this? And then, based on that, I have to do my regular update. I have to know why and then do my regular update. Now, to conclude, we have always to understand our cash flow. We have to understand, again, there is a big difference, and we face that a lot, between doing